Mozzie Smith says he prefers Batman, so he says Ohio State must be Iron Man. As we welcome in one of our superheroes on College Ball Weekly, Anthony Bellino. You see him every morning right here in the X's and Bros show on BCSN. Anthony, thank you for joining us for this superhero matchup.
I mean, wow, what an intro. I mean, the BCSN superhero, man, I feel like I need that, the student section of the week belt or something. I need some sort of trophy or some sort of award here, but thank you, my friend. As always, it is an absolute pleasure. And Mark, you can't go 12-0 if you don't start off 11-0 for the Wolverines.
Well, speaking of trophies, I've always said the Ohio State-Michigan game is so big, you don't need to play for a brass spittoon or a jug or a wooden turtle because they're always playing for the Big Ten championship. It's the Big Ten East championship, but they're playing for a championship on Saturday.
Yeah, this one here is for all the marbles. And, you know, watching a lot of the teams in the top 25, especially those teams in the top 5, really struggle this weekend. Even the teams that won, everybody struggled 1 through 4. And then, of course, Tennessee, with their disaster, they laid an absolute egg against South Carolina. It almost felt like everybody was already looking forward to rivalry week. And I think that it's a very good wake-up call for everybody. And as I was watching that Ohio State-Maryland game after surviving the bitter cold, yes, folks, I have officially thawed out from Saturday. 20 degrees at kickoff, 20-mile-an-hour winds. But all I could think about is, you know, yes, it would have been great to see Maryland win, but at the same time, you want Ohio State to be 11-0. You want this game to be the matchups of undefeateds like it was back in 06, like it was in 97. You want it to, you want the opportunity to play for all the chips that are on the table. And that's exactly what it is. I mean, the winner punches their ticket, not only the Big Ten championship game, but more than likely the college football playoff as well, considering the West hasn't necessarily been the strongest division in all of college sports. So it is, this is literally the granddaddy of them all. This is the most meaningful game on the schedule in college football this weekend.
You said the granddaddy of them all. That's the Rose Bowl. It's likely that the loser of this game, if they don't backdoor their way into the college football playoff, will head to the Rose Bowl. It's quite a change then from what we've seen for the previous 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years where the Rose Bowl wasn't the consolation prize, but that's this new era of college football. And quite frankly, in the very near future, we could have a college football situation where Ohio State and Michigan play not once, not twice, but 3 times in the same season. Is that going to take away something from the game when there's going to be possibilities for rematches down the road?
You know, I think if the College Football Playoff Committee, and when they go through their expansion process and they start to look at this 12-team format, I think what you want to do is take a look at what the NCAA tournament does and some of their rules and how they seed things, you know, according to conferences, to make sure that teams don't see each other or try not to see each other, you know, in that first weekend. I think that that's imperative. And I think that, you know, with Michigan and Ohio State, with the way that they have been playing, more than likely those two teams are going to be in the top 6. I still think that the matchup between these two, with all the history on the line, that no matter how the college football playoff evolves, it will still be the most meaningful game played between Michigan and Ohio State throughout the course of the regular season. There's too much history on the line to win the Big Ten championship. No matter how things evolve and change, that's always going to be priority number 2. Priority number 1 is to beat your rival. For Ohio State, it's the team up north. For Michigan, we just call them Ohio State. We don't have any fancy nicknames. We don't cross anything out. We don't do anything crazy like that. It's just Ohio State. So when you look back at the course of history, now I'm not a big fan of the Rose Bowl, Mark. That committee, that group, that individual, those board members, if you will, have really perturbed me because they're kind of getting in the way here of college football playoff expansion. And I don't think they're actually looking out for their best interest of this bowl game, but that's another story for another day. But really, I think that Ohio State, Michigan, no matter how things change, no matter how things evolve, there is too much hatred involved between these two programs, between their fan bases. It's never, even if they had to play each other again, it still matters most when the Big Ten championship is on the line.
And I suppose one thing we should point out when you're talking about the Rose Bowl, it's more than just a football game for a lot of the people in Pasadena. It is the Tournament of Roses. It is the Rose Bowl parade. And that's really part of the reason why the football game wants to be where it wants to be, because it wants to have the parade in the morning leading into the football game. So the game ends as the sun setting in the third quarter. There's so many factors involved, but that's for a conversation for another day, another time. Let's get back to the game. Jim Harbaugh says this will be the toughest test to date for the Wolverines. You can understand where he's coming from, as he took a very measured approach on Monday, saying no time for hate. We're grateful for this opportunity. We're grateful to be able to just demonstrate that we have the right stuff to win this game.
Yeah, smart move. I mean, there's been plenty of barbs back and forth. You look back to a couple of years ago, and Ryan Day said that allegedly he wanted to hang 100 on Michigan. Then you look at Jim Harbaugh's comments last year about, some guys are born on third base and think that they hit a triple. Like, there's been no shortage of jabs thrown, but I think that both coaches know now. Obviously, they don't want their kids to have to walk across that field and shake hands, and the coaches definitely don't want to shake hands on the losing side after this football game. Everybody knows what's at stake. I don't think anybody needs to say anything to put any bulletin board material. But I think that, he's absolutely right. And I'm sure Ryan Day feels the same. To get to this point of the season, no matter what your expectations are, but to get here at 11-0 to play this game for all the marbles, that's the opportunity that everybody wants. That's the opportunity that everybody wishes for, no matter what side of the fan base that you're on. And for Ohio State, their reign of terror over this conference over the last 10, 15 years, I mean, it's been Ohio State and nobody else. And now, after Michigan's Big Ten championship and birth of the college football playoff last season, you look at, okay, is this another legitimate contender for the Big Ten? Penn State's taken a step back. Michigan State has essentially fallen off of a cliff. I mean, they lost a game where a guy completed 2 passes against them, for God's sakes, in overtime. Who are the other contenders? Iowa struggles with the forward pass. This year they can't seem to score touchdowns. Minnesota's always a cute pick in the beginning, and then they pilfer off. Wisconsin, my goodness, what happened to the Badgers? So they're really, who's that representative? Who's that team that's going to challenge Ohio State? Because even though I am a Michigan man, folks, Ohio State is the cream of the crop. There's a reason that they're 7.5-point favorites for this game. There is a reason why they are ranked number 2 in the country, and Michigan is ranked behind them at 3. And that's the pedigree. That's the standard. That's the expectation of what Ohio State football has become. And when you look at the Big Ten Conference, when you look at everybody outside the SEC, it's the Buckeyes that you're chasing. It's not Georgia or Alabama, because even those can kind of seem, with all the talent and the 5 stars that they get, the location of where they're playing football, that's almost unattainable. So if you're the rest of the country, you're looking at Ohio State. This is the premier program. They can play in any weather. They have a great up-tempo, modern-day style offense. They throw the football all over the field. They also have a run game to complement it. You're typically pretty good defensively as well, with the amount of NFL talent that they produce. That's the standard. That's what Michigan has been playing catch up to for a very, very long time now. And it feels good to know that, actually going into this game for the first time since the early 2000s, I actually feel relatively confident about what Michigan can do, if hopefully maybe they can get back to somewhat close to full strength. You had 4th string Isaiah Gash getting some huge touches in that game last week against Illinois. Will Schoonmaker be available? He's been so pivotal with Eric all out at the tight end position. They had to go to Loveland last week. You start to look at, of course, Blake Corum's injury. How does that affect the passing game moving forward? Michigan forced to throw the football a lot more, that the run game left them a little bit against Illinois. Will the Buckeyes defense be as good as Illinois? Illinois, they were stacking that box with 7, 8, sometimes bringing the safety up, getting 9 guys in there. And that's a big challenge, but they have the defensive weapons on the perimeter to be able to shut down your wide receivers. Will Ohio State take a look at that and say, hey, you know what? We're going to man up on the outside. We might play cover 1 or cover 2 with a deep safety and stack everybody else inside and make Michigan beat them up front. That's where Michigan was successful last year. And obviously it's where they've had all their success this year.
We don't know the full status of Blake Corum. Safe to say he will not be 100%. It's also safe to say he's going to do everything he can to play on Saturday. But if Blake Corum can go, a lot of pressure then falls onto young J.J. McCarthy's shoulder. Mike Sanistril says he called him the miracle boy after the way he led Michigan to the come-from-behind win over Illinois. McCarthy has not played at Ohio Stadium. Most of the Wolverines have not played at Ohio Stadium. 2018, the last time Michigan played at Ohio Stadium, because the 2020 game was wiped out because of COVID. How much pressure will be on J.J. McCarthy? Is he going to be able to take this first true hostile environment, with all due respect to Iowa?
Yeah, this is a completely different ball game. I mean, respect to Iowa. They do the wave to the kids. That's great, but they don't pose a threat. I mean, if this game turns out to be a shootout, for lack of a better way to put it, if they're scoring, it's punches and bunches from Ohio State, and Michigan's got to play from behind, and they got to find a way to get quick scoring possessions, that's not their game. They haven't been asked to do that all season. And even last week against Illinois, they could have used a couple. They settled for some field goals. It all worked out well. But you're looking at J.J. McCarthy, who's thrown for 1,900 yards, 14 touchdowns, 2 picks. I think C.J. Stroud might have had that by week 3. You know what I mean? And if the Ohio State Buckeyes, if offensively they put up a lot of points, Michigan is going to be in trouble. There hasn't been a football game that Michigan has really, the game against Illinois maybe, stands out here because Michigan wasn't able to control the tempo, but they kept it within striking distance where a couple of field goals could win that game. If Michigan can't control the line of scrimmage, if they cannot control the pace of the game and then the number of possessions by dominating up front in the trenches and activating that run game, everything falls on JJ McCarthy. So I look at that first drive for Michigan against Illinois. I loved everything Michigan did in that drive. Of course, it always helps when Blake Corum breaks off a 30-plus yarder to start the game, but a couple of nice, easy throws to get JJ McCarthy on the move. I love when they roll them out. I love when they have the drag route or the slant route across the middle. Any sort of crossing route is always good in college football because it takes a while to really be able to communicate that. We even see professionals struggle with that and that communication. So the crossing route's got to be there. Get JJ a couple early throws, a couple of easy completions for him to build that confidence, get that swagger going a little bit. And of course, I mean, if there's a game that you're going to sell out and have to run the football with your quarterback, this might have to be the one. I would look for some more of those wrinkles where they maybe try to spread the Buckeyes out a little bit, utilize the play action and get JJ McCarthy on that naked bootleg and running for his life. Get as many yards as you can without getting contact. I mean, he's down the field against Illinois throwing blocks. I love him for it, but at the same time, kid, you got to protect yourself a little bit. So I would expect to see JJ McCarthy in the quarterback run game, something I'm not a fan of, but I would expect them to utilize this because it's all hands on deck. I mean, Archer's on the ready, man the ramparts. This is it. There's no tomorrow after on Saturday.
Interesting thing, two teams 11-0, final games of the regular season, but I don't know if anybody can say with full confidence that they know how good either Ohio State or Michigan is this year because they haven't truly been tested. They've had maybe some semi-tests, and certainly Illinois last week for the Wolverines was a semi-test. But are we going to really find out finally on Saturday if either of these teams are good, either of these teams are great, or either of these teams are elite?
If there's a blowout one way or the other, I think that you take that winner of that football game and you prop them up a little bit. I still think that the committee will look at Michigan a little strange because they play a much more old-fashioned style of offense, and they don't air it out. It's not as attractive without that air raid style of offense where you're throwing the ball 40 times a game down the field for 300 yards. So I think that the committee still kind of looks at Michigan a little cockeyed there. But at the same time, if there's a blowout here, they're going to elevate that team. Every team struggled. I mean, TCU beats Baylor, a struggling Baylor team, by a last-second field goal to remain undefeated. You look at USC and UCLA, a high-scoring affair there between those two teams. Anybody could have won that thing. USC barely makes it out. Georgia struggled with Kentucky. I mean, there were some games this past weekend, of course, Tennessee with their blowout loss on the road to South Carolina. This has been one of the better years in college football because there hasn't been that clear-cut favorite. I think a lot of people point to maybe Georgia for that, but even Georgia struggled before Kentucky. It was Missouri, right? They've showed some weakness in their armor as well. And of course, that's going to happen when you send 85 guys to the NFL. But you get my point here is that every team has a legitimate opportunity, and that's why I think that no matter what, this has been one of the best seasons in college football. And I think as we all are going to focus on the college football playoff, we're all going to focus on the national championship. We're all going to focus on Saturday. Part of the attractive thing about college football is the season in its entirety. I think that is a massive part of the sport that sometimes we overlook a little bit. It's about the bands and the cheerleaders and the pageantry of the sport. The schedule is the schedule. Of course, you want to schedule up, but there's really no reward for that. So you might as well, take your easy dubs early in the season, get to this point in the year where you're 11-0, and then kind of, if you win the game, the chips will fall. And that just is what it is. I mean, you have to get through Ohio State regardless if you ever want to sniff the Big Ten championship or make it to the playoffs. So, it all comes down to Saturday.
2001 was a watershed moment in the rivalry when Jim Tressel turned the tables for Ohio State. We'll find out if 2021 was a similar moment for Jim Harbaugh if the Wolverines can get win number 2 in a row on Saturday in Columbus. I want to thank our guest from the X's and Bros show, Anthony Bellino. Anthony, thank you so much.
I got a shameless plug here. Tyvis Powell, Wednesday morning at 7:30. We're going to re-air it on Friday. You know, the guy who intercepted the pass from Devin Gardner was kind of a big play when they won 42-41. My brother-in-law, Tyvis Powell, he is going to join the program. It's excellent. You won't want to miss it. And of course, Mark, as always, it's Go Blue. Bring the helmet out. It's game time. It's rivalry week. Here we go, Michigan. I'll see you next week.